Yo, 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 welcome back to Son of a Preacher Man. Soapman is in the house. We're all familiar with the Ark of the Covenant. You've at least heard of it before. If not, it's basically just a box made of shittim wood, overlaid with gold. The top of the box is flanked by two golden winged cherubim. In the ancient world, this was the most important and sacred relic to the ancient Israelites. All the other nations or contemporaries of the ancient Israelites knew this to be true. But what was most important was not the Ark of the Covenant, but its contents. You see, the Ark of the Covenant was more than a box. It was more like a house. And what it housed was the 10 Commandments, written supposedly by the very finger of God himself. But like modern day pieces of furniture, it came with accessories. Now these furniture pieces were further enclosed in an enclosure, which was then enclosed by a greater enclosure. So in essence, the Ark of the Covenant was a box in a box in a box. This entire structure was known as the tabernacle, and it consisted of two courts, an outer court and an inner court. Now, in the outer court, it was open to the public. They were welcome to come and offer their sacrifices. The priest would help them, but only the priest and the high priest were allowed into the inner court, which was further divided into two sections, the holy and the most holy. With the Ark of the Covenant, no doubt, being housed in the most holy section. Think of this like a house, folks. The Lord's house. You're welcome to come play and barbecue and picnic on the front porch, but you can't come in. So where did the ancient Israelites come up with this concept of a tabernacle? Where did they get the idea of this holy place, this most holy place, and the Ark of the Covenant? One might assume that they borrowed the idea from the ancient Egyptians, who, as you can see in this slide here, had similar structures. The most holy place is here in the back, just like with the Hebrew tabernacle. You see, there's a procession, there's a way, several sections that you must pass through to get to the most holy place. And one of them, like the Hebrew or the ancient Israelite tabernacle, is a courtyard. So one can almost see the relationship between the two. The question is, who borrowed it from who? Take a look at this tabernacle of the Egyptian queen Hatshepsut. This is a grandiose tabernacle made of stone. If you see my arrow here, you see a stairway leading up to a vast courtyard. It's humongous. And then you see another stairway leading up to what is almost certainly a holy place. And you can almost bet your bottom dollar that in that holy place, or in conjunction to that holy place, or adjacent to that holy place, is a most holy place, either with a coffin, an idol, a statue of a god. The ancient Egyptians made their tabernacles of stone. But the ancient Israelites, being shepherds, their tabernacle was really just a tent. But don't kid yourself, this was a souped up, hyped up, high octane tent. It was decorated exquisitely, fit for a god. And I'm not gonna lie, folks, it must have been a sight to see, especially with the 12 tribes flanking the tabernacle on all sides. So where did the ancient Israelites get this concept of a tabernacle and a holy place and an Ark of the Covenant? Did they borrow it from the Egyptians, or did the Egyptians borrow it from them? This is an ancient Egyptian ark. As you can see, it's a box just like the ancient Israelite ark. It's exquisitely decorated just like the ancient Israelite ark. It can hold something in it, just like the ancient Israelite ark. But here's the thing. The ark in ancient times was not just an ordinary box. Like I said before, it was a house. Think about Noah's Ark. It didn't matter whether this house was on land or on a boat. What an ark really was in ancient times was a house. Look at this slide. You see an ark, and on top of the ark is an Egyptian god. You see, this is the real purpose of the ark. It doubles as a seat for a god or a deity. This is what they believed in ancient times. So there's no confusion about what this thing is. The ark is a box that doubles as a chair, as evidenced by the picture on this slide. What you see is someone important being carried by subjects. Because when you're a king or a god or someone of importance, you don't walk, you're carried. And people may say, well, the ancient Israelite ark had 2 winged cherubims on top. So maybe they were the idols, or maybe they were the gods being worshiped. No, they were just decoration. As you see in this slide, you see furniture, you see cherubim, you see lions, you see sphinxes flanking and decorating the king. What the cherubims are meant for are to accentuate what's between them on the seat. The deity, the God, that's what's important. And the cherubim's function is to point to that aspect, to point to that fact that this is what's important, not us, but what's between us sitting on this seat. And you see this in many cultures, not just the Egyptian culture, not just the ancient Israelites, but in the Assyrian culture, in the Babylonian culture, in the Sumerian culture, and all the cultures in and around Mesopotamia. Just like the Egyptian ark, the ancient Israelite ark doubles as a seat. It's even called the mercy seat. This is where the God of the ancient Israelites sits between the 2 cherubim, and the ark is carried around on poles just like with the Egyptian deities or the Egyptian gods. There's only one difference between the ancient Israelites and the ancient Egyptians when it comes to this holy seat. In almost every other culture, there is a deity or a god sitting on the ark. Egyptians, it's either one of their gods, or an Egyptian pharaoh, or an Egyptian high priest, or someone of the royal family. Not so with the ancient Israelites. According to Moses, this God is a formless God. He is a shapeless God. He is a tasteless God. He's nothing. And at the same time, he's everything. This God cannot be looked upon, cannot be imagined. He's imitable, meaning he cannot be copied or recreated or even replicated. So the Ark of the Covenant remains an empty seat. Here's why I don't think it's entirely fair to say that the ancient Israelites borrowed the concept of a tabernacle from the ancient Egyptians. In the same token, here's why I don't think the ancient Egyptians borrowed the concept of a tabernacle and a holy ark from the ancient Israelites. It's because I believe both borrowed the concept from the ancient Mesopotamians, the land in and between 2 rivers. The ancient Greeks called it Mesopotamia, and in southern Mesopotamia were the people of Sumer and Akkad. Now, the Mesopotamians had been building these tabernacle-like structures long before even the first dynasties of Egypt formed. And all of the strength of the Mesopotamians, all of the knowledge, all of the sophistication and technology, all of the power and belief of these people in and around these rivers comes from the people of Sumer and Akkad. On this channel, we've been talking about Adam and Eve a lot. We've been on the hunt for Adam for at least the last 10 episodes. In my last episode, I tried to establish when Adam came out of the Garden of Eden and where he went. And according to the ancient Sumerians, Adam set up shop as the first king in the city of Eridu. I also said that we found a ziggurat at Eridu, and at the top of that ziggurat was a building that was very similar to the Ark of the Covenant. It was almost a reflection, a building with an empty room with furniture decorating an empty couch. And one of my viewers said, hold up, what? Nah, you gonna have to explain that. And so explaining that is the purpose of this episode. The Bible says a river ran through the Garden of Eden and split into 4 rivers, 2 of which were the Tigris and the Euphrates. And we know there's only one Tigris and Euphrates river in modern day Iraq. And indeed, when we trace those rivers back, they merge just like the Bible says that they would. But there's only the Tigris and Euphrates river. The other 2 rivers are missing, and there's no Garden of Eden where the rivers merge. That river simply empties into the Persian Gulf, as it should. This is a good thing. This is a very good thing because it's in accordance with the Bible. We shouldn't expect to find the Garden of Eden. The Bible says that Adam and Eve were exiled out of the Garden of Eden, and that God hid the Garden of Eden, and that it would never be found. This is the Persian Gulf. This is how it has looked since 4000 BCE. Please remember that number, 4000 BCE. The Persian Gulf has not changed. And the Tigris and the Euphrates River have merged and emptied into it uninhibited as far back as 4000 BCE. This entire area changes the further we go back in time. As far back as 6000 BCE, we see that the other 2 missing rivers have reappeared. Look at this map. The shoreline has changed. The shoreline now is way further deeper into the Persian Gulf. And above the shoreline, where there is now water, where there is now nothing but hundreds of feet of water, there was land. Remember this number, 6000 BCE. In 6000 BCE, there was land here in the northern area of the Persian Gulf. And just like the Bible says, a river ran through that land and broke into 4 rivers, just like the Bible says. So we have this window of time to work with. 6000 BCE, there's land in the northern area of the Persian Gulf. So if there's a Garden of Eden there, Adam and his family are safe. They have no reason to leave. And people don't pick up and leave, and people don't uproot their entire family and leave unless they have to. So at 6000 BCE, we know Adam is safe. There's no reason for him to leave. But in 4000 BCE, something has already happened, and that area is not going to change after 4000 BCE. So we have a 2000-year window to work with. When did Adam come out of the Garden of Eden? And where did he go? Let me show you how I found the answer. You find the answer with evidence. Everything leaves evidence of itself. Let me give you an example. If Superman comes and lands in Indiana, think of the uproar there will be. Not only will he physically, literally make a big boom and leave an imprint that can be found and examined and studied, but think of all the people who will talk and take pictures and post on their Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook. Everything leaves evidence of itself. Now, Adam may be no Superman, but he's a very important character in the Bible. And if Adam, being as big and important and holy as he is, shows up somewhere, he's going to make an impact. He's going to have influence, and there will be evidence. So in this 2000-year window, we're looking at a change. We're looking for a change, something to let us know that something happened to cause this change. So in order to do this, let's go back to 10,000 BCE, long before Adam's time. Oh, were you under the impression that Adam was the first man on earth? No, silly goof. As far back as 10,000 BCE, you had the Sarma culture and you had the Hasuna culture. Though they were in northern Mesopotamia, it is clear and the evidence shows that there were plenty of people around on earth long before Adam came along. The Halaf culture, also in northern Mesopotamia, has been well documented. The way we distinguish these cultures from each other are by the things that they leave behind. None of these cultures could write back in 10,000 BCE. Well, the Halaf culture, they appeared around 8,000 BCE. But no one was writing back at these times. The way we distinguish these people is by what they left behind, what they created, the figurines, their artwork, the style of their artwork. More times than not, it's through their pottery and their figurines is how we identify these different cultures. The Halaf culture were skilled craftsmen, and they traded their style of pottery all over northern Mesopotamia, and we have evidence of it. And take a look at this piece of pottery. This just goes to show how skilled they were. At first glance, I did not notice the pattern or design of the bird with outstretched wings repeating over and over. I don't know if you caught that at first glance, but just goes to show how skilled these people were. They were not just dumb cavemen. And we have evidence to show where they were, where they went, who they traded with, and the influence they had on their neighbors. You find their style of pottery all over the region. The Halaf culture emerged around 8,000 BCE and dissipated around 6,000 BCE. And that butts up right to the time that we want to look at, that window between 6,000 BCE and 4,000 BCE. In 4,000 BCE, we have the people of Sumer and Akkad that emerged in southern Mesopotamia. And it's the people of Sumer that we want to look at. Just like with other cultures, the Sumerians distinguished themselves with their pottery. There's no doubt that these people were sophisticated and advanced. It shows. There's no doubt the influence they had, not just on Mesopotamia, but on the world. They changed the world. For God's sakes, they're credited with the invention of the wheel. It's not like the Sumerians showed up shooting ray guns and flying spaceships. They did more with less. For example, they saw whoever was living in the area making pottery on a potter's wheel. And they took what they were doing and started mass producing pottery. They saw people piddly-widdly making plants and planting crops, and they did it on a massive organized scale. Not only with the wheel did they mass produce pottery, but they said, let's take that wheel and flip it on its side and attach it to a wagon and have it drawn by donkeys. So you have these people, they're like geniuses. They're super sophisticated. They're super advanced. They do the most with less. So where did they come from? When did they show up on the scene? Who are the Sumerian people? Because they don't speak the language and they show up out of nowhere at the pinnacle of their sophistication. The thing that makes the Sumerians are their holy temples. Everything revolved around the holy temple, or what we call today a ziggurat. The Sumerian people knew the story of Adam and Eve, evidenced by this clay tablet, which you probably can't see very well. So here's a recreation via a drawing. You see a man on the right, a woman on the left. In between them is a tree bearing fruit and a snake slithering up behind the woman. Now compare this to a modern day image of the story of Adam and Eve, and you have the exact same components. It eerily resembles the ancient tablet. In fact, it's almost identical. If the Sumerians weren't already impressive enough, they wrote, which meant they read. The Sumerians could write In fact, they established the first recognized writing system called cuneiform. And the Sumerians wrote down a list of their kings on a four-sided stone pillar. Today we call it the Sumerian Kings List. And these kings reigned for an unimaginable length of time. Their first king, Ululim, said to have lived for 28,800 years. The second king, Alaulgar, ruled for 36,000 years. And these two ruled from a city called Eridu, according to the ancient Sumerians. Similarly, in the Bible, it states that Adam and his descendants lived for an extraordinary long time. Though not nearly as long as the ancient Sumerian kings, still considerably longer than the average human being. Not only that, like the ancient Sumerian king, Adam and his descendants were pre-flood. They were antediluvian characters. They were antediluvian figures, meaning they existed before the flood. So Adam and his descendants have a lot in common with the ancient Sumerian kings, even at a first glance. A closer look reveals an even more intricate relationship. For instance, the first 10 ante or pre-flood Sumerian kings are eerily similar to the first 10 descendants of Adam. The seventh king on the Sumerian king list, Enmenduranki, has an eerily similar story to the seventh descendant of Adam, Enoch. Both figures live for the shortest amount of time on the respective list of 10. And both figures have a story attached to them to where they're taken up into the heavens by God. Similarly, the 10th descendant of Adam, Noah, survives a global flood with only he and his immediate family surviving. The 10th king on the Sumerian king list, Ziusudra, has the exact same story. All of these characters are antediluvian. All of them live for an extraordinary long time. And individuals within the list have not similar stories, but the exact same story. Come on. I showed in previous episodes that Ululim, the first king of Sumer, was really Adam. If you take Ululim's reign of 28,800 years and divide it by the approximate days in a month, 30.95, you get the lifespan of Adam. Equally, if you take Alaulgar's reign of 36,000 years and divide it by the approximate number of days in a month plus 9, you get the number of years Seth lived, which is 912. 930 years Adam lived, it corresponds to Ululim, and 912 years Seth lives corresponds to Alaulgar. So what the ancient Sumerians are saying in 4000 BCE is long ago, in this very city of Eridu, reigned our king. They're not saying Adam was the first man. They're saying he was the first king. He was our king. He was the first king on earth, and he was our God. If you do a quick Wikipedia search, it says, according to a later Mesopotamian tradition enshrined in the Sumerian king list, the first king was Ululim, ruler of the city of Eridu. Cuneiform tablets that we found tell the story over and over of Ululim. One reads, after the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. In Eridu, Ululim became king. He ruled for 28,800 years. Alaulgar ruled for 36,000 years. Two kings, they ruled for 64,800 years. Here's the funny thing. Modern scholars and experts will tell you that Uruk is the oldest city ever discovered. But the Sumerians who founded the city of Uruk will tell you that Eridu was the first city ever on Earth. We know that in 6000 BCE, Adam was safe in the Garden of Eden, and there was land in the northern part of the Persian Gulf. So we're looking for an event that happened after 6000 BCE. And we know that this area, geology teaches us that this area was rocked by a massive earthquake. So we know how the Garden of Eden was destroyed, and we know why Adam had to leave. We just can't pinpoint yet when he left and where he went. Look at this map very closely. You see the Tigris and the Euphrates River. You see this dotted line here that extends outside the Euphrates River? Well, that's where the Euphrates River used to be. Something moved the river from this dotted line to where it is now. Folks, now I know what you're thinking. Move a river? How the hell do you do that? Well, let me tell you, there is only one possible way that a river can be moved, and that's by an earthquake. And that's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for an event that happened after 6000 BCE. And we know that the Garden of Eden was destroyed by an earthquake. And here we have the Euphrates River moving. But how do we determine when that happened? The city of Eridu goes as far back as 8000 BCE, when it was just a settlement. Now, what do I mean by settlement? Just a few hundred people, no more than 500. But there was a period in the history of Eridu where it went from a settlement and the population swelled into a town. And then it swelled from a town to what could only be described as the first city in history. This period that we're looking at is called the Ubaid period. The Persian Gulf, ironically, was flooded. And this settlement, which wasn't even called Eridu, swelled to about 500. Now, this was, at this point in time, one of the biggest settlements on the planet. There were settlements as big in northern Mesopotamia. But this settlement in what would be called Eridu, it didn't just swell to 500 people. It swelled, and then it swelled again, and then it doubled, and then it doubled again until it reached 2,500 people. And at this point, you can't call it a settlement anymore. At this point, it's a town by any standards. But it didn't stop there. And don't forget, coincidentally, the area was flooded at that time. This is the smoking gun we were looking for. Evidence of an earthquake. We have that with the Euphrates River shifting to the east. The land, including the area of the Persian Gulf, flooded. Adam and Eve had to leave. And we have this settlement swelling to the size of a small town. Like all other cultures, we distinguish the Ubaid culture by their pottery. Now here's the thing, it wasn't super special or futuristic, but there was one difference. Most Ubaid pottery, or a lot of it, was marked to show ownership. Was this a precursor to writing? I don't know. Their pottery, like other cultures, distinguished them from other cultures. One thing that absolutely sets the Ubaid culture apart are their clay figurines, evidenced by this snake-like figurine on the slide. These snake-like or alien-like figurines really generated a buzz when they were found, leading to modern-day ancient astronaut theorists to believe that there was once an alien race of lizard people. But never forget how stupid people are. Never forget that you are surrounded by idiots. So here's the thing, we excavated at Eridu. It's sitting down there now in southern Iraq, even to this very day. And though we didn't excavate a lot, Let's talk about what we found from the little bit that was excavated. We can tell that at one time, this place was booming. At its height, it held 20,000 people. That, my friends, would be an ancient metropolis. It was a trading hub, and it was peaceful. There were no wars back then. Eridu was a booming metropolis. And look here in the corner, if you see my arrow, what do you see? A ziggurat looming over the city. This would have been the crown jewel of the city. Here's the thing. We found the first temple ever at Eridu. The very first temple on earth was found at Eridu.
The Ubaid culture appeared suddenly in southern Mesopotamia around 5800 BC. Dr. Katharina Streit analyzed pottery, artifacts, and Bayesian.
Did you hear the lady? The Ubaid culture suddenly appeared in 5800 BCE. And similar to the Sumerians, they appear out of nowhere and they don't speak the language. And here's the thing. There's no distinct line between the times of the Ubaid culture and the Sumerians. They overlap, they blend, they kind of transition one into the other. They may even be the same people. Remember, the Sumerians say, long ago, our people ruled here in Eridu. And that was in 4000 BCE. In 5800 BCE, we find the Ubaid people living in Eridu, the Ubaid culture. We find it in and around the city of Eridu.
Statistics to determine that the Ubaid had no known origin group. Linguists agree that their language is not related to any language that might have preceded it. Adam and his descendants practiced animal sacrifice, as demonstrated with Abel's offering. The first known altar for animal sacrifice in the entire world, found in Eridu, a city of the Ubaid culture, dated to 5570 BC.
The first and oldest temple was found in Eridu, at the time that I think Adam left the Garden of Eden. This temple that was found in Eridu is the first temple ever on earth, and it is the precursor to the ziggurat. And here's how it happened. It started off just being a room. Look at the bottom half of this slide. It starts off as just a room. I'm not even sure if it had a roof. It eventually gets a roof and becomes a building. But in this room, in this building, there's just an altar and a place for a god, a seat, an empty seat. This place starts off as a room. There's just an altar and an empty seat. It eventually becomes a building, or Earth's first temple. So what happens as time goes on, the temple was expanded into a platform and a newer temple was built on top. The holy temple with the room, with the altar and the empty seat, never changes. Neither does the location which the temple is built on, but it does get more elaborate and more fancy as time goes on. And as time goes on, they just keep stacking newer temples on top of old ones. They keep expanding the old one and building a new, more sophisticated, more updated, more modern temple on top. And this is the birth of the ziggurat. This is how it came to be. These early first step pyramids of ancient southern Mesopotamia. And here's the thing, they get bigger and bigger and more elaborate as time goes on. You can see the top is sometimes painted a different color to accentuate the ziggurat. It's the crown jewel, is this holy temple. And what I want to stress is that Eridu, it never changes. Now, throughout history, as time goes on and these temples get bigger and more flashier, they have idols that are worshipped in these temples. The Sumerians are well known for their idol worship. And here you see in this slide, you see 2 temples on this platform. And they get really fancy with these places. They get really elaborate with these places. And there's always idol worship. The Sumerians worshipped hundreds of gods, maybe even more. Best believe after 4000 BCE, there's a idol at the top, in that top building of this ziggurat. Because From 4000 BC onward, the Sumerians worshipped hundreds of gods. And as time goes on, these ziggurats just keep getting more expansive and they keep getting taller, up, way into the clouds, as far into the sky as they can go. Remember the tale of the Tower of Babel? It was a ziggurat. In Eridu, there's a ziggurat that was unfinished. It's of an enormous size, but only the foundation was laid, and then it was just left off. I don't even think the foundation was finished. At Eridu, there is an unfinished ziggurat. And in the story, and in the Bible, there is a story of a Tower of Babel that was unfinished because God confused the people through their language, through their many different languages and tongues. And we have the remains of that tower in Eridu. Here's the thing. As time went on, from 4000 BCE onward, these ziggurats were the center of idol worship. That holy temple, that holy of holy temple, that holy place at the top of the ziggurat held a statue or idol of a god that they sacrificed to, but not in the early days of Eridu. Not this first ziggurat that was found in Eridu. No matter how fancy and big it got, the contents of the most holy place, which was the temple at the very top, the contents remained the same. It was just an empty seat and an altar in front of it. In this slide, you see a man sitting in front of what would have been the altar, and to his right is an empty chair, just like the Ark of the Covenant. This is where the concept and idea of the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle comes from. It comes from Adam, and he's the one who should get the credit.
For 2,000 years, the Ubaid built temples, indicating there was a commonly shared religion among the group. But here's what makes Ubaid temples different. There were no idols. Unlike nearly every other ancient culture, the Ubaid temples lack statues of gods, which indicates a monotheist religious structure.
There were no idols found on the temple at Eridu during the Ubaid period. I want to thank you for joining me for this episode of Son of a Preacher Man. If you enjoy this type of content, leave a like. If you got questions that you want me to answer or topics that you want me to discuss, please leave them in the comments section. If you have any insults, comments, or compliments, please also leave them in the comments section. I'll see you next time. Same soap time, same soap channel, where we gonna dig into the book of Enoch. Soapman signing off. Peace.